It's red! Oh god! We're gonna tip over. We're gonna tip over.
Jack Traven had already earned a reputation inside the Los Angeles Police Department as an officer who stayed calm when everything around him was falling apart. Alongside his experienced partner, Harry Temple, Jack had spent years responding to dangerous situations that most people could never imagine. Their teamwork was built on trust, quick thinking, and courage, qualities that would soon be tested in the most terrifying mission of their lives. On what seemed like another ordinary day, the city was busy with people heading to work, traffic filled every street, and life continued as usual. No one had any idea that a criminal mastermind was preparing a deadly challenge that would place hundreds of innocent lives in danger. High above the city streets, inside a crowded office building, a luxury elevator was carrying employees to their offices when disaster suddenly struck. Without warning, the elevator shuddered violently before coming to a stop several floors above the ground. The passengers inside looked at one another in confusion, believing it was only a temporary mechanical failure. Within moments, panic began to spread as the lights flickered and emergency alarms echoed through the metal cabin. The trapped passengers quickly realized that something far more serious was happening. Outside the building, emergency crews rushed to the scene after receiving distress calls from frightened people inside. Firefighters, police officers, and medical teams surrounded the skyscraper while anxious family members gathered behind safety barriers. Jack and Harry soon arrived after being informed that the elevator was trapped under suspicious circumstances. Their instincts immediately told them that this was no ordinary accident. After speaking with technicians and building engineers, they discovered signs that someone had deliberately sabotaged the elevator system. Before they could fully understand the situation, a mysterious phone call reached the authorities. The caller calmly revealed that he had planted explosives beneath the elevator and demanded a large ransom. If his demands were ignored, everyone inside would die. The chilling confidence in the bomber's voice made it clear that he was intelligent, patient, and completely willing to kill innocent people to prove his point. Jack refused to allow fear to control his judgment. While negotiators tried to keep the bomber talking, Jack carefully studied the building's layout. Every second mattered, because the damaged elevator was slowly slipping lower, placing enormous pressure on its weakened cables. Harry examined the maintenance shafts and realized there might be a narrow path to reach the trapped passengers from above. Together, they created a risky rescue plan that required perfect timing. Jack climbed through dark maintenance passages, squeezing through tight spaces filled with dust, cables, and steel beams. The atmosphere became more intense with every step because one wrong move could trigger the explosives. Inside the elevator, the frightened passengers struggled to remain calm. Parents comforted their children while office workers prayed silently, unsure if they would ever see their families again. Eventually, Jack managed to reach the roof of the elevator. Through a small opening, he reassured the terrified passengers that help had arrived. His calm voice brought a small sense of hope, even though the danger remained overwhelming. Jack instructed everyone to move carefully and prepare for an emergency evacuation. At the same time, Harry coordinated with firefighters waiting above the elevator shaft. The operation demanded incredible precision because the elevator could collapse at any moment. As rescue workers prepared ropes and safety equipment, the bomber watched the entire situation from a hidden location, monitoring police communications with satisfaction. He believed he had anticipated every possible move the authorities might attempt. To him, this deadly game was not only about money, but also about proving that he was smarter than everyone trying to stop him. While negotiators continued speaking with the criminal, Jack noticed something unusual about the damaged elevator. The explosive device appeared to be designed with multiple triggers, making it almost impossible to disarm safely. Realizing there was little time left, Jack made a bold decision. Instead of trying to disable the bomb, he focused entirely on saving the passengers before the elevator collapsed. One by one, frightened civilians were carefully lifted through the opening in the roof and pulled to safety by firefighters waiting above. Every successful rescue increased hope among the trapped victims, but it also increased the risk that the bomber would realize his plan was failing. Jack knew the criminal could decide to detonate the explosives at any moment. Just when it seemed the rescue was nearly complete, disaster struck. The weakened elevator suddenly shifted downward, causing terrified screams to echo through the shaft. The remaining passengers struggled to maintain their balance while rescue workers fought desperately to pull them out. Jack refused to leave anyone behind. Ignoring his own safety, he helped the final passengers climb through the narrow opening before making his own escape. Only seconds after everyone reached safety, the elevator plunged violently down the shaft before exploding in a massive fireball. The powerful blast shook the building, sending smoke and debris into the air. Everyone watching from outside stood frozen as flames erupted from the lower floors. Miraculously, every hostage had survived thanks to Jack's fearless determination and Harry's careful planning. Although the city celebrated the successful rescue, Jack understood that the nightmare was not over. The bomber had escaped without being identified, proving he was still out there planning his next move. Police investigators searched every piece of evidence left behind at the crime scene. Among the recovered materials, they discovered sophisticated wiring, military-grade explosives, and carefully constructed triggering mechanisms. These clues suggested that the criminal possessed professional knowledge of explosives and engineering. Detectives soon connected the attack to a former police bomb squad officer named Howard Payne, a man who had once served the city before being forced into retirement after a serious injury. Bitter, intelligent, and driven by revenge, Payne believed society had abandoned him. He wanted money, but more importantly, he wanted everyone to recognize his brilliance by defeating the police in a deadly contest of intelligence. Determined to end the threat, Jack and Harry followed several investigative leads that eventually brought them to Payne's apartment. The building appeared quiet, almost abandoned, creating an uneasy feeling before they even entered. Moving cautiously through the narrow hallways, they searched each room for signs of the suspect. Instead of finding Payne himself, they discovered an apartment filled with bomb-making equipment, surveillance devices, and enough explosives to destroy the entire building. Jack immediately realized they had walked into a deadly trap. Before they could safely escape, Payne contacted them through a hidden security camera. Calmly mocking the officers, he revealed that the apartment was wired with explosives designed to kill anyone attempting to arrest him. Within seconds, the apartment exploded in a devastating blast. Jack and Harry barely escaped with their lives by diving through a nearby window just before the explosion consumed the building. Fire and shattered glass filled the air as emergency crews rushed toward the burning structure. Investigators believed Payne had died in the explosion because a badly damaged body was recovered from the wreckage. However, Jack remained unconvinced. Something about the scene felt carefully staged. Payne had demonstrated remarkable intelligence during the elevator crisis, making it difficult to believe he would accidentally destroy himself. Jack quietly warned his fellow officers that the bomber might still be alive despite the apparent evidence. As the city slowly returned to normal, Jack tried to put the terrifying events behind him, but deep inside he knew the battle was far from over. Howard Payne had already proven that he could turn ordinary places into deadly traps without warning. If he had survived, his next attack would almost certainly be even more dangerous than the first. Jack's instincts told him that Payne was preparing another deadly challenge, one that would push him beyond anything he had ever experienced. Unaware that fate was about to place him aboard a city bus carrying dozens of innocent passengers, Jack continued his daily duties, believing he had seen the worst. In reality, the true nightmare of speed had only just begun. The following morning, Los Angeles appeared peaceful once again. The traffic flowed through the streets, commuters hurried toward their jobs, and school buses filled the roads with children beginning another ordinary day. To everyone else, the terrifying elevator incident was already becoming yesterday's news. Jack Traven, however, could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. His instincts continued warning him that Howard Payne had survived the apartment explosion. Payne was too intelligent, too methodical, and far too determined to simply disappear. Jack's concerns were dismissed by many of his fellow officers who believed the bomber had died in the blast. Although the investigation officially closed, Jack quietly remained alert, convinced that the nightmare was not over. His fears proved correct sooner than anyone expected. While Jack was beginning another shift, a public telephone suddenly rang nearby. When he answered, a familiar voice greeted him with unsettling confidence. It was Howard Payne. Calm, sarcastic, and completely in control, Payne congratulated Jack for surviving their previous encounter. He revealed that the body recovered from the apartment belonged to another man, allowing him to fake his own death and escape unnoticed. Jack immediately realized he was dealing with a criminal who planned every detail long before putting his schemes into action. Payne enjoyed manipulating the police, forcing them to react while he stayed several steps ahead. Every word he spoke carried confidence because he knew he had already launched the next phase of his deadly plan. Payne wasted no time explaining the rules of his newest game. He informed Jack that he had hidden another bomb somewhere in the city. This time, however, the device was attached to a public transit bus carrying dozens of innocent passengers. The bomb had an extremely dangerous trigger. Once the bus reached a speed of 50 miles per hour, the explosive system would activate. If the speed ever dropped below 50 again, the bomb would immediately detonate, killing everyone on board. Payne's voice remained disturbingly calm as he explained the horrifying conditions. He was not interested in negotiation or compromise. Instead, he wanted Jack to solve another impossible problem while racing against time. Payne believed the challenge would finally prove that no police officer could outsmart him. Jack immediately informed his superiors, and panic spread throughout the police department. Officers quickly attempted to identify which city bus had been targeted before it reached the critical speed. Hundreds of buses operated across Los Angeles every day, making the search incredibly difficult. Dispatch centers flooded radio channels with emergency messages, while officers raced through traffic trying to locate the correct vehicle. Every passing minute increased the possibility that the bomb would activate before anyone found it. Jack understood that if they failed to identify the bus quickly, dozens of innocent people would die without ever knowing the danger surrounding them. Meanwhile, on an ordinary city route, bus 2525 continued picking up passengers without any indication that it had become the center of a deadly terrorist attack. The passengers represented every part of society. Office workers reviewed paperwork, tourists admired the city through the windows, elderly passengers quietly discussed daily life, and students listened to music completely unaware of the hidden explosive attached beneath the vehicle. Among the passengers was Annie Porter, a cheerful young woman whose driver's license had recently been suspended for speeding. Forced to use public transportation, Annie joked with the driver about how unusual it felt riding instead of driving herself. Her friendly personality quickly made her one of the more memorable passengers on the bus. The experienced bus driver, Sam, focused entirely on navigating the busy streets. Traffic lights, crowded intersections, and impatient drivers demanded his full attention. Like everyone else on board, he had absolutely no idea that every mile he traveled brought the vehicle closer to a deadly trap. Beneath the floor of the bus, hidden from sight, Payne's sophisticated explosive device waited silently. Every component had been carefully designed to activate only after the bus exceeded 50 miles per hour. Once armed, there would be almost no chance of safely stopping the vehicle. Back at police headquarters, investigators finally discovered clues leading them toward bus 2525. Surveillance information and Payne's carefully timed phone calls allowed Jack to narrow the search area. Without wasting another second, he jumped into a police vehicle and sped through heavy traffic toward the bus's location. Sirens echoed across the streets as he ignored red lights and narrowly avoided collisions. Every delay increased the chances that Payne's plan would succeed. Jack knew he had only one opportunity to reach the bus before the bomb became active. Eventually, Jack spotted the city bus several blocks ahead, moving steadily through traffic. He accelerated until he caught up alongside it, carefully observing the passengers through the windows. Everything appeared completely normal. People chatted casually, looked out the windows, or simply relaxed during their morning commute. None of them realized that death was only moments away. Jack contacted headquarters by radio and confirmed he had located the correct vehicle. Police immediately began preparing emergency support while bomb squad specialists rushed toward the area. Unfortunately, there was almost no time to organize a proper rescue. As Jack followed the bus, unexpected traffic conditions forced the driver to increase speed while merging onto a faster roadway. The speedometer climbed steadily until it crossed the critical 50-mile-per-hour mark. Hidden beneath the bus, Payne's bomb activated exactly as designed. A small electronic signal confirmed that the explosive system was now armed. From this moment forward, slowing below 50 miles per hour would instantly trigger a devastating explosion. Payne watched remotely through hidden surveillance equipment, smiling as the deadly game officially began. Jack realized the bomb had likely activated and immediately attempted to warn the driver. He maneuvered his vehicle alongside the moving bus and shouted instructions through the open window. At first, the driver looked confused, believing Jack was responding to a routine traffic issue. Only after Jack desperately explained that the bus was carrying a bomb did the driver begin to understand the horrifying reality. Panic immediately spread across his face as he struggled to keep control of the speeding vehicle. The passengers noticed the unusual conversation and slowly began realizing that something was terribly wrong. Jack climbed onto the moving bus with incredible precision, risking his own life by leaving his speeding police car behind. Hanging onto the side of the vehicle, he carefully entered through the front door while the bus continued racing down the highway. Inside, frightened passengers demanded answers as Jack quickly explained the situation. Fear instantly swept through the crowded bus. Some passengers screamed, others cried, and several refused to believe such an unbelievable story. Jack firmly ordered everyone to remain calm because panic alone could cause an accident capable of killing everyone aboard. The driver struggled to maintain steady speed while navigating traffic, but the emotional pressure became overwhelming. Every passing car, every sharp turn, and every unexpected obstacle threatened the lives of everyone on board. Jack attempted to reassure both the driver and passengers, promising them that he would find a solution. Deep inside, however, he understood that they were trapped inside one of the most dangerous situations imaginable. There was no safe place to stop, no opportunity to escape, and no guarantee that anyone would survive. Far away, Howard Payne calmly observed the chaos unfolding exactly as he had planned, confident that his deadly masterpiece had only just begun. As the reality of the situation settled over the passengers, the atmosphere inside the bus changed completely. Only minutes earlier, people had been chatting casually, reading newspapers, or staring out the windows. Now every face reflected fear and uncertainty. Some passengers whispered prayers, while others stared silently at Jack Traven, hoping he could somehow save them. Jack understood that keeping everyone calm was just as important as dealing with the bomb itself. One frightened passenger making a reckless decision could destroy every chance they had of surviving. Jack quickly introduced himself as an LAPD officer and explained the situation in clear but reassuring terms. He instructed everyone to stay seated and avoid sudden movements. Panic, he warned, would only make the situation worse. Although many passengers were terrified, Jack's confident voice helped restore a small sense of order. His calm attitude reminded them that someone capable was fighting for their lives. Annie Porter watched Jack carefully. Unlike many others, she remained surprisingly composed despite the terrifying circumstances. She could see the determination in his eyes and realized he had no intention of giving up. Outside, police headquarters immediately launched a massive emergency response. Patrol cars raced toward the highway, helicopters filled the sky above the bus, and emergency medical teams positioned themselves along possible routes. Television news helicopters also arrived, broadcasting live images across the city. Within minutes, millions of people were watching the dramatic chase unfold on television. Traffic authorities worked desperately to clear roads ahead of the speeding bus, but Los Angeles traffic was unpredictable. Every intersection, every traffic jam, and every careless driver created another deadly obstacle. Meanwhile, Howard Payne remained completely in control. Hidden inside his secret observation point, he monitored police radio frequencies and watched live television coverage with satisfaction. Everything was happening exactly as he had planned. He wasn't simply interested in collecting ransom money anymore. Payne wanted to humiliate the police department, especially Jack Traven. Every successful rescue by Jack only motivated Payne to create an even more impossible challenge. To him, the passengers were nothing more than pieces in a deadly game of strategy. Inside the bus, another crisis suddenly developed. The frightened driver, Sam, struggled to keep the speeding vehicle under control. The pressure became unbearable as traffic grew heavier. While trying to avoid another vehicle, Sam was unexpectedly struck in the shoulder by a gunshot fired from outside during a chaotic misunderstanding involving a nearby civilian. The injury caused him to lose control for several terrifying seconds. Passengers screamed as the bus swerved violently across multiple lanes. Jack immediately rushed forward, grabbed the steering wheel, and helped stabilize the vehicle before disaster struck. Sam's injury was serious. Blood quickly soaked through his uniform, and it became obvious he would soon lose the strength needed to continue driving. Jack realized they needed another driver immediately, but replacing someone behind the wheel of a bus traveling over 50 miles per hour was almost impossible. Every movement had to be perfectly coordinated because even the slightest mistake could reduce the speed below the critical limit. The entire bus remained silent as everyone waited to see what Jack would do next. Annie Porter stepped forward without hesitation. She admitted that although her driver's license had recently been suspended for speeding, she had plenty of driving experience and believed she could handle the bus. At first, Jack hesitated. Allowing an ordinary civilian to drive under such dangerous conditions seemed incredibly risky. However, after looking at Sam's worsening condition, he realized there was no better option. Annie's confidence and willingness to help impressed him. Together they carefully planned the driver exchange. The transfer required incredible precision. Jack instructed Annie exactly when to move while he temporarily assisted with the steering wheel. Sam slowly released his grip despite the pain, and Annie carefully slid into the driver's seat. Every passenger held their breath. One wrong movement could jerk the bus, causing sudden braking or loss of control. Fortunately, Annie remained remarkably calm. She gripped the steering wheel firmly, pressed the accelerator steadily, and successfully took control of the speeding vehicle. A wave of relief spread through the passengers as they realized the dangerous transfer had succeeded. Jack immediately radioed police headquarters with an update. He informed them that Annie was now driving while the injured driver required emergency medical attention. Authorities quickly organized a risky rescue operation using a flatbed vehicle moving alongside the bus. As both vehicles matched speed, officers carefully transferred Sam onto the rescue truck. The operation was extremely dangerous, but it succeeded without slowing the bus. Sam was rushed to the hospital while Annie officially became responsible for keeping dozens of passengers alive. Although the successful transfer boosted everyone's confidence, the situation remained desperate. Jack still had no idea exactly how the bomb worked. He believed the only hope was to inspect it from underneath the moving bus. With assistance from the police, a small maintenance platform was positioned beneath the speeding vehicle. Wearing safety equipment and holding onto a metal cable, Jack slowly climbed underneath while the bus continued racing down the highway at more than 50 miles per hour. The view beneath the bus confirmed Jack's worst fears. Howard Payne had built an incredibly sophisticated explosive device. The bomb was securely attached to the chassis using reinforced brackets and protected by anti-tampering mechanisms. Jack carefully examined the wiring without touching anything. Suddenly, he noticed a small camera mounted near the bomb. Payne wasn't simply tracking the bus, he was watching Jack in real time. Every movement Jack made was visible to the bomber. Almost immediately, Payne called Jack through the bus radio. Amused by Jack's discovery, he mocked the officer for thinking he could secretly inspect the bomb. Payne calmly explained that if Jack attempted to disconnect or damage the device, the bomb would explode instantly. He had anticipated every possible rescue attempt long before launching his plan. Jack realized he wasn't dealing with an ordinary criminal. Payne had engineered every detail to eliminate almost every possible solution. With no choice but to retreat, Jack climbed back inside the bus and informed everyone that removing the bomb wasn't currently possible. Although disappointed, he refused to lose hope. He knew there had to be another weakness somewhere in Payne's plan. As Annie continued driving with remarkable focus, Jack began studying maps, traffic routes, and possible escape options. Every minute that passed increased the pressure. Fuel levels slowly dropped, roads became more crowded, and exhausted passengers struggled to remain calm. Far ahead, another deadly obstacle was waiting. Construction crews had unknowingly left a major section of unfinished freeway directly in the bus's path. The missing roadway stretched across a huge gap that no ordinary vehicle could safely cross. Neither Jack nor Annie knew about the danger yet, but within minutes they would be forced to make an impossible decision that could either save everyone or send the speeding bus crashing into disaster. As the bus continued speeding through Los Angeles, every passing mile introduced new dangers. Annie Porter gripped the steering wheel tightly, refusing to let fear affect her concentration. Although she had never imagined herself driving a crowded city bus under life or death circumstances, she adapted quickly. Jack Traven stood beside her, constantly watching the road ahead while communicating with police headquarters. Behind them, the passengers remained tense and exhausted. Hours of non-stop fear had drained everyone's energy, but they understood that staying calm was their only chance of survival. Outside the bus, law enforcement agencies worked together on an unprecedented scale. Police motorcycles blocked intersections, highway patrol officers redirected traffic, and helicopters monitored every movement from above. Television stations continued broadcasting the dramatic chase live, turning the terrifying event into national news. Millions of viewers watched anxiously as the speeding bus raced across the city. The pressure on Jack increased with every minute because the entire country was now witnessing the deadly confrontation between him and Howard Payne. Despite the coordinated emergency response, the police still had very few options. They could not stop the bus, they could not safely remove the bomb, and they could not risk forcing the vehicle into an accident. Bomb experts carefully analyzed every piece of information Jack had provided, but Payne's explosive device was unlike anything they had encountered before. Every safety mechanism had been designed to punish anyone attempting to interfere with it. The criminal had anticipated almost every rescue strategy, leaving the authorities with almost no room for error. Meanwhile, Payne remained completely relaxed inside his hidden control center, watching multiple television broadcasts and listening to police communications. He smiled as his carefully designed plan unfolded exactly as expected. He admired Jack's determination but believed the officer would eventually fail. Payne considered himself an artist of destruction rather than an ordinary criminal. Every bomb he built demonstrated his intelligence, and every successful manipulation of the police boosted his enormous ego. To him, fear itself was a weapon more powerful than explosives. Back inside the bus, tensions suddenly rose when one nervous passenger lost control. Believing the police had no real plan, he panicked and demanded that the bus stop immediately. He shouted that remaining on board guaranteed death and insisted everyone should jump from the moving vehicle. His emotional outburst frightened several other passengers, threatening to create complete chaos inside the crowded bus. Jack quickly stepped forward and confronted him before panic spread any further. Jack spoke firmly but respectfully, reminding everyone that slowing the bus would instantly kill every person on board. The frightened passenger continued arguing until another passenger helped calm him down. Annie never took her eyes off the road during the confrontation. She knew that even a brief distraction could send the bus into another vehicle. Gradually, the passengers regained control of their emotions and returned to their seats. Jack thanked them for trusting him, promising once again that he would not abandon them. A short time later, another unexpected problem appeared. The fuel gauge showed that the bus would eventually run out of fuel if they continued driving endlessly. Jack immediately contacted police headquarters, and emergency planners began organizing a complicated refueling operation without allowing the bus to slow below 50 miles per hour. Matching the speed of a moving bus while transferring fuel had never been attempted before, making the operation incredibly dangerous. As officers prepared the refueling equipment, Jack continued scanning the road ahead. Suddenly, he noticed something alarming in the distance. The freeway appeared strangely empty. with police desperately trying to divert traffic away from a particular section. Through the shimmering heat above the highway, Jack could barely make out construction barriers blocking the road. His heart immediately sank. Something was terribly wrong. Police helicopters quickly confirmed the horrifying truth. A large section of the elevated freeway ahead had never been completed. Construction crews had left a massive gap where the roadway simply ended before continuing again on the opposite side. Under normal circumstances, every vehicle would exit long before reaching the unfinished section. Unfortunately, the speeding bus could not slow down enough to take the exit safely. They were heading directly toward an enormous gap that no bus should ever be able to cross. Jack immediately informed Annie about the missing freeway. For a brief moment, both of them fell silent as they realized the impossible situation they faced. Turning around was impossible because traffic blocked every alternative route. Stopping meant certain death from the bomb. Continuing forward appeared equally suicidal because the bus would drive straight into open air. Every passenger noticed the growing tension between Jack and Annie and sensed that another major crisis had arrived. Police officers desperately searched for another escape route, but there was simply no time. Jack quickly calculated the distance remaining before the gap. He estimated that if Annie maintained maximum speed, there was at least a slight possibility the bus could jump across the unfinished section. It sounded completely insane, but every other option guaranteed death. Annie looked at Jack with uncertainty. No ordinary bus had ever attempted such a jump, yet she understood there was no alternative. Jack turned toward the passengers and calmly explained what was about to happen. Gasps filled the bus as everyone learned they would have to jump an unfinished freeway at high speed. Some passengers cried openly while others held onto nearby seats as tightly as possible. Annie tightened her grip on the steering wheel, pressed the accelerator harder, and aimed the bus directly toward the end of the freeway. The engine roared as the bus accelerated even faster. The speedometer climbed higher while the unfinished roadway rushed closer with terrifying speed. Helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting every second live across the nation. Inside the bus, complete silence replaced the earlier panic. Everyone held their breath. Jack braced himself beside Annie while shouting one final instruction. "Hold on!" The front wheels reached the broken edge of the freeway, and suddenly the entire bus launched into the air. Time seemed to stop as the massive vehicle flew across the enormous gap. Passengers screamed while loose objects floated weightlessly through the cabin. For one unforgettable moment, the impossible became reality. Suspended high above the empty space below, the bus seemed to defy gravity itself. The front wheel slammed violently onto the opposite side of the freeway, followed by the rear wheels with an earth-shaking impact. The suspension groaned under the tremendous force as sparks flew beneath the chassis. The bus bounced dangerously, but somehow remained upright. Annie fought desperately to regain control, while Jack grabbed nearby handrails to steady himself. Behind them, terrified passengers slowly realized they were still alive. Against every expectation, the impossible jump had succeeded. Cheers, cries, and emotional laughter filled the bus as relief swept through the passengers. Even police officers watching from helicopters could hardly believe what they had witnessed. Howard Payne, however, was far less impressed. Watching from his hidden location, he simply smiled. In his mind, surviving the freeway jump only made the game more entertaining. He was already preparing his next move, determined to prove that escaping one impossible obstacle did not mean Jack had won. The deadliest part of Payne's plan was still waiting, and Jack had no idea how much more dangerous the journey was about to become. The successful freeway jump gave everyone aboard the bus a brief moment of hope, but that feeling disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. The passengers had survived what seemed impossible, yet nothing about their situation had actually changed. The bomb remained armed beneath the bus, the vehicle still could not slow below 50 miles per hour, and Howard Payne continued watching every move they made. Jack Traven understood that surviving one obstacle only meant they had earned a little more time. Unless they found a way to defeat Payne, the nightmare would eventually end in disaster. Inside the bus, emotions were running high. Some passengers laughed in relief after surviving the incredible jump, while others broke down in tears. A few hugged complete strangers, realizing how close they had come to death. Annie Porter kept both hands firmly on the steering wheel, refusing to let herself relax even for a second. The jump had shaken the bus violently, and she could feel that the vehicle was becoming more difficult to control. Jack stood beside her, impressed by her courage. Despite having no professional training, Annie had become the only reason the passengers were still alive. Police headquarters continued searching desperately for a solution. Bomb technicians carefully analyzed every detail Jack had reported from underneath the bus. Unfortunately, every possible plan ended the same way. The explosive device was too advanced to disarm while the bus remained in motion. Cutting the wrong wire would instantly trigger the bomb, and even attempting to remove it would activate Payne's anti-tampering system. Time continued slipping away, and frustration spread throughout the command center. Howard Payne, meanwhile, contacted Jack once again. His voice remained calm and almost cheerful, as though he were discussing an ordinary business transaction rather than threatening dozens of innocent lives. Payne reminded Jack that the passengers were only alive because he allowed them to be. He demanded a ransom of $3.7 million, insisting the money be delivered exactly as instructed. If the police failed to meet his demands, everyone aboard the bus would die. Jack tried to keep Payne talking, hoping investigators could trace the call, but Payne was too careful. Every phone call lasted only long enough to deliver instructions before he disappeared once again. While the police prepared the ransom money, another unexpected problem developed inside the bus. One passenger noticed a small gap near one of the windows and believed escaping might be possible. Fear clouded his judgment, and despite Jack's warnings, he secretly attempted to force his way out. He believed jumping from the moving bus was safer than remaining trapped with a bomb. Before anyone could stop him, he managed to break the emergency exit window. The moment he tried to climb outside, disaster nearly struck. The explosive device beneath the bus had been designed with additional sensors that detected sudden changes around the vehicle. The bomb partially armed another safety feature, causing warning lights to flash. Jack immediately realized Payne had anticipated desperate escape attempts. He grabbed the passenger and pulled him back inside before anyone else followed. Furious but understanding, Jack reminded everyone that every reckless action endangered every life aboard the bus. The frightened man apologized, realizing his panic had almost caused a catastrophe. Outside, police commanders decided the only remaining option was to move the bus onto a controlled area where emergency crews could continue helping without heavy traffic. They identified a nearby airport with long open runways capable of accommodating the speeding vehicle. Airport authorities immediately shut down operations, clearing aircraft from the runways, while emergency teams prepared for the bus's arrival. Jack approved the plan because open space would reduce the constant danger of collisions with other vehicles. Annie carefully steered the bus toward the airport under police escort. Helicopters remained overhead while patrol cars blocked every entrance leading toward the runways. As the bus entered the airport grounds, the passengers noticed enormous passenger aircraft parked in the distance. For the first time in hours, there were no crowded intersections, traffic lights, or impatient drivers surrounding them. The open runway offered temporary relief, allowing Annie to focus entirely on maintaining speed rather than avoiding city traffic. Although the airport provided more room, the danger remained constant. Fuel consumption continued increasing, the passengers grew more exhausted, and the intense emotional pressure affected everyone on board. Several people began suffering from dehydration and anxiety after spending hours trapped inside the speeding vehicle. Medical teams followed nearby, ready to help if anyone could somehow be evacuated safely. Unfortunately, the bomb still prevented any large-scale rescue operation. Jack refused to stop searching for weaknesses in Payne's plan. He carefully questioned every passenger, hoping someone might have noticed something unusual before boarding the bus. During these conversations, he gradually developed a stronger connection with Annie. Despite everything happening around them, the two shared brief moments of conversation that revealed their personalities. Annie admitted she had always believed her suspended driver's license would be the biggest problem she would ever face. Jack smiled, joking that she had certainly found a much more difficult driving test. Their light-hearted exchange briefly eased the overwhelming tension inside the bus, reminding everyone that hope still existed. As the bus circled the airport runway, bomb experts proposed another dangerous idea. They believed Jack might be able to lower himself beneath the bus again and inspect the explosive device more closely. This time, however, they wanted him to identify whether Payne had overlooked any structural weakness that could be exploited. Jack agreed immediately. He understood the enormous risk, but remaining passive guaranteed eventual failure. Using specialized equipment provided by emergency crews, Jack once again climbed beneath the speeding bus. The roaring wind made every movement difficult as he slowly approached the bomb. Looking more carefully than before, he noticed something unusual. One small section of the explosive device was connected to the bus using a separate mechanical bracket rather than the main frame. It wasn't enough to remove the bomb safely, but it suggested Payne's design might not be completely perfect. Before Jack could investigate further, the hidden surveillance camera detected his presence once again. Howard Payne immediately called the bus, laughing as he watched Jack crawling beneath the vehicle. Payne congratulated him for his determination, but warned that curiosity would eventually get everyone killed. Then, with frightening confidence, Payne revealed another piece of information that shocked Jack. The bomb was only one part of his overall plan. Even if the passengers somehow escaped the bus, Payne had already prepared the next stage of his operation. He hinted that Jack would soon face an even greater challenge involving the ransom money itself. Payne wasn't simply planning to collect millions of dollars. He intended to eliminate every witness before disappearing forever. Jack climbed back into the bus with a growing sense of urgency. He now understood that Howard Payne was thinking far beyond the current situation. Every move the police made had already been anticipated, and every apparent opportunity might actually be another trap. As Annie continued driving across the endless runway, Jack stared ahead, knowing the final confrontation with Payne was rapidly approaching. The race to save the passengers was entering its most dangerous stage, and one mistake would cost dozens of innocent lives. As the bus continued circling the airport runway, the passengers found themselves caught between hope and exhaustion. Hours had passed since Howard Payne's terrifying plan had begun, and the emotional strain was becoming almost unbearable. Every person on board had accepted that their lives depended entirely on Jack Traven and Annie Porter. There was no safe place to stop, no chance to escape, and no certainty that they would survive another hour. Despite the overwhelming pressure, Jack refused to let despair influence his decisions. He understood that as long as the bus was still moving, there was still a chance to defeat Payne. Police commanders established a temporary operations center near the runway, bringing together bomb experts, tactical officers, engineers, and emergency medical personnel. Every specialist offered ideas, but none could guarantee success. Payne's bomb was unlike anything they had encountered before. The explosive device had been designed to punish every predictable rescue attempt. Even so, Jack believed that no criminal could create a perfect plan. Somewhere hidden within Payne's complicated design, there had to be a weakness. Meanwhile, Howard Payne remained remarkably calm. Watching events unfold from his secret location, he showed no signs of panic. He monitored television coverage, listened to police radio communications, and occasionally contacted Jack simply to remind him who controlled the situation. Payne enjoyed watching fear spread among both the passengers and the authorities. To him, psychological control was just as satisfying as the bomb itself. Every minute that passed increased the pressure on the police while strengthening his confidence. Inside the bus, Annie's concentration never wavered. Although physically exhausted, she maintained a steady speed while carefully steering across the wide airport runway. Jack admired her determination. Most ordinary people would have collapsed under such pressure, yet Annie continued driving with remarkable courage. Their conversations became more personal as they worked together. Annie admitted she was terrified but refused to let fear control her actions. Jack responded honestly, admitting that he was frightened too. Courage, he explained, did not mean being fearless. It meant continuing to act despite fear. His words encouraged not only Annie but also the passengers who overheard the conversation. As fuel levels continued dropping, police officials realized they could not keep the bus driving forever. They urgently searched for a method of safely removing the passengers without triggering the bomb. During a strategy meeting, one engineer proposed an unusual idea. Since the bomb exploded only if the bus slowed below 50 miles per hour, perhaps the passengers could leave while the bus remained in motion. The suggestion sounded incredibly dangerous, but desperate situations demanded creative thinking. Emergency crews quickly modified a large flatbed trailer with protective padding. The plan required the trailer to drive alongside the speeding bus at exactly the same speed. Passengers would carefully cross from the bus onto the trailer one at a time. If successful, everyone could be rescued while the empty bus continued moving until another solution was found. Jack immediately approved the plan despite understanding the enormous risks involved. The rescue operation began with extreme caution. The trailer slowly matched the bus's speed while officers secured both vehicles together as safely as possible. Jack opened the bus's rear emergency exit and instructed passengers to remain calm. The first volunteer carefully stepped across the narrow gap separating the two vehicles. Every officer watching held their breath. One slip could send someone beneath the wheels of either vehicle. The first transfer succeeded. Encouraged by the success, additional passengers slowly crossed onto the trailer under Jack's supervision. One elderly passenger hesitated, overwhelmed by fear, but Annie encouraged her with reassuring words until she found the courage to continue. Children were carried across first, followed by adults helping one another maintain balance. The operation progressed slowly but successfully, giving everyone hope that the impossible rescue might actually work. Then everything changed. One frightened passenger accidentally dropped a heavy suitcase while crossing between the vehicles. The falling luggage struck the side of the bus before crashing onto the trailer below. Although no one was injured, the loud impact caused several passengers to panic. The trailer momentarily drifted away from the bus, widening the dangerous gap between them. Jack shouted for everyone to stop moving while officers struggled to reposition the trailer. For several terrifying seconds, it seemed the entire rescue operation would fail. Fortunately, both drivers regained perfect alignment before anyone fell. The remaining passengers carefully completed the crossing until only Jack and Annie remained inside the bus. Looking around the nearly empty vehicle, Jack finally allowed himself a small smile. Against incredible odds, almost every passenger had been rescued alive. It was a remarkable achievement, but the most dangerous part of the mission was still ahead. Suddenly, Howard Payne called once again. His voice sounded colder than ever. He congratulated Jack for saving the passengers, but calmly revealed that he had anticipated this possibility. Payne explained that his true objective had never been simply killing innocent civilians. The bus had served another purpose. It distracted the entire police department while he prepared to collect the ransom money. Jack immediately realized they had been playing directly into Payne's hands. Every police officer in the city had focused on the speeding bus, leaving Payne free to organize the next stage of his plan. Payne ordered the authorities to deliver the $3.7 million ransom exactly as instructed. If they attempted any trick, he promised to continue killing innocent people until his demands were met. Jack knew the confrontation was entering its final phase. The bus crisis was ending, but the battle against Howard Payne himself had only begun. Determined to prevent Payne's escape, Jack climbed onto the roof of the speeding bus while Annie remained behind the wheel. Strong winds battered him as he searched for one final opportunity to outsmart the bomber. Below him, the nearly empty bus continued racing across the runway, with the armed explosives still attached underneath. Police officers watched anxiously, uncertain what Jack intended to do. Then Jack noticed something in the distance. At the far end of the runway stood a massive cargo aircraft being moved across the taxiway. The slow-moving plane completely blocked the bus's path. Annie saw it too. There was no time to stop, no room to turn, and no chance to avoid the collision. Jack and Annie exchanged one brief look. Both understood exactly what was about to happen. Within seconds, the speeding bus would crash directly into the enormous aircraft, setting the stage for the most explosive moment of the entire operation. Jack stood frozen as he faced Howard Payne inside the speeding subway train. Annie Porter was handcuffed to a metal support, standing directly between the bomber and the police officer. Payne smiled confidently, believing he had finally trapped Jack in an impossible situation. The train rushed through the dark underground tunnels at high speed, shaking violently as it passed every curve. The remaining passengers had escaped into other train cars, leaving only Jack, Annie, and Payne for the final confrontation. Jack knew he had only one chance to save Annie without allowing Payne to escape. Payne mocked Jack, reminding him that every challenge throughout the day had led to this moment. He claimed the police had underestimated him from the beginning and that no one could defeat his carefully planned operations. Jack remained silent, carefully watching Payne's movements instead of responding to his insults. He noticed that the speeding train occasionally swayed from side to side, causing Payne to lose his balance for brief moments. Jack realized he needed only one small opening to change everything. Annie also remained calm despite being terrified. She avoided making sudden movements that could provoke Payne. Instead, she carefully watched Jack, trusting him completely. Jack slowly lowered his weapon, pretending to surrender. Payne relaxed slightly, believing he had finally gained complete control over the situation. That tiny moment of overconfidence became his biggest mistake. As the subway train entered a sharp curve, it lurched violently to one side. Payne lost his balance for just a split second. Jack reacted instantly. He raised his pistol and fired one accurate shot. The bullet struck Payne in the shoulder, forcing him to release Annie. Payne cried out in pain as his gun slipped from his hand and slid across the floor of the train. Annie quickly threw herself to safety while Jack charged directly at the wounded bomber. The two men crashed into each other with tremendous force. Their fight became brutal as they exchanged punches inside the shaking subway car. Every sudden movement of the speeding train threw them against walls, seats, and metal poles. Payne fought with surprising strength despite his injury, refusing to surrender after coming so close to success. Jack knew he had to end the fight before Payne recovered his weapon. During the struggle, the suitcase containing the ransom money burst open, scattering bundles of cash across the floor. Payne instinctively reached toward the money instead of focusing on Jack. His greed gave Jack the opportunity he needed. Jack landed a powerful kick that sent Payne crashing into the driver's compartment. The impact destroyed several control panels, causing sparks to fly throughout the cabin. Warning alarms immediately began sounding as the subway train accelerated even faster. Jack quickly realized they now faced a new disaster. Annie rushed to Jack after freeing herself from the damaged handcuffs. Together they looked at the shattered control panel and understood that the train's braking system had been badly damaged during the fight. Although Payne was injured, the runaway subway had now become an even greater threat. Racing deeper into the underground tunnel at uncontrollable speed, the train was heading toward unfinished tracks. Jack took a deep breath, knowing the battle with Howard Payne was almost over, but the fight to survive had only just begun. Jack and Annie quickly realized that Howard Payne was no longer their only problem. During the violent fight inside the subway, the train's control system had been badly damaged. Warning alarms echoed through every car as the train accelerated deeper into the tunnel. Jack searched desperately for the emergency brake while Annie tried contacting subway control. Unfortunately, the communication system was destroyed and no one could stop the runaway train from outside. Meanwhile, Howard Payne slowly stood up despite his gunshot wound. Refusing to surrender, he grabbed his fallen pistol and aimed it at Jack once again. Annie spotted him and shouted a warning. Jack reacted instantly, tackling Payne before he could fire. The two men crashed into the front of the subway car, continuing their brutal fight while the speeding train shook violently beneath them. Payne managed to grab an emergency knife from the driver's compartment and lunged toward Jack. Jack caught his wrist just in time, struggling to keep the blade away. After several intense seconds, Jack twisted Payne's arm until the knife dropped to the floor. Furious, Payne grabbed Jack and pushed him toward the shattered windshield at the front of the train. Jack used all his remaining strength to deliver one final punch. Payne stumbled backward through the broken windshield and slammed into a metal railway signal beside the tracks. The impact killed him instantly. After hours of terror, Howard Payne's deadly game finally came to an end. Although Payne was dead, the subway train continued racing out of control. Jack and Annie pulled every emergency lever they could find, but nothing worked. Looking ahead, they saw the end of the tunnel approaching. The unfinished track offered no chance to stop safely. Seconds later, the runaway train burst out of the tunnel and jumped off the tracks. It crashed through construction barriers, smashed across the street, and finally came to a violent stop after tearing through concrete and steel. Dust and debris filled the air as emergency crews rushed toward the wreckage. Jack and Annie climbed out of the destroyed train, exhausted but alive. Police officers and firefighters quickly secured the area while medical teams treated the survivors. Looking back at the wreckage, both realized the nightmare was finally over. With Howard Payne defeated and every hostage safe, Los Angeles could finally breathe again. Jack and Annie shared a quiet smile, knowing they had survived one of the most dangerous days of their lives. Their courage, teamwork, and determination had saved countless innocent people, bringing the thrilling story of Speed 1994 to an unforgettable ending. The ending of Speed 1994 is much more than a simple action finale. On the surface, it looks like another exciting Hollywood climax, where the hero defeats the villain and saves the day. However, when you look more closely, the final act reveals the personalities of the three main characters, Jack Traven, Annie Porter, and Howard Payne, and explains why the film remains one of the greatest action thrillers ever made. Jack Traven's greatest strength throughout the movie is not his physical ability, but his decision-making under pressure. From the very beginning, whether rescuing people trapped inside the elevator or boarding the speeding bus, Jack constantly makes difficult choices within seconds. Every decision carries enormous risk, yet he refuses to panic. The movie repeatedly shows that courage does not mean being fearless. Jack experiences fear like everyone else, but he never allows it to control his actions. His calm thinking becomes the reason dozens of innocent people survive. Howard Payne represents the complete opposite. He is intelligent, patient, and highly skilled with explosives, but he allows his pride to destroy him. Payne believes he is always the smartest person in the room. Instead of escaping after receiving the ransom money, he continues challenging Jack because he wants recognition more than success. His need to prove his superiority becomes his greatest weakness. Throughout the story, Payne creates increasingly dangerous situations simply to demonstrate his intelligence. In the end, his obsession with defeating Jack personally prevents him from escaping safely. Annie Porter also experiences one of the biggest transformations in the movie. At first, she is introduced as an ordinary passenger who happens to be riding the bus because her driver's license was suspended. She has no police training, no combat experience, and no knowledge of explosives. Despite this, she becomes one of the story's true heroes. Annie remains calm during impossible situations, takes control of the speeding bus, and supports Jack during every major challenge. Without her courage and determination, Jack could never have saved the passengers. One of the film's greatest strengths is its pacing. Instead of slowing down after each action sequence, the movie immediately introduces another challenge. The elevator rescue leads to the bus bombing, the bus crisis leads to the ransom exchange, and the ransom exchange leads to the subway chase. Every victory creates another problem, keeping the audience constantly engaged. This non-stop momentum became one of the reasons Speed changed the action genre during the 1990s. Another important aspect is the relationship between Jack and Annie. Unlike many action films where romance feels forced, their connection develops naturally. They begin as complete strangers trapped in an impossible situation. As they work together, trust slowly grows into genuine affection. Their relationship is built on teamwork rather than dramatic romance. By the end of the film, both characters understand each other because they survived extraordinary circumstances together. The movie also explores the psychology of fear. Every passenger reacts differently to danger. Some remain calm, others panic, and a few make reckless decisions. These reactions feel realistic because people respond differently under extreme pressure. Jack's leadership becomes essential because he understands that controlling fear is just as important as defeating the bomb itself. From a filmmaking perspective, Speed relies heavily on practical effects instead of computer-generated imagery. Most of the bus driving, explosions, crashes, and stunt work were performed practically, giving every action sequence a realistic appearance. This authenticity helps the audience feel every moment of danger. Even decades after its release, many viewers believe the action still looks impressive because it was created using real vehicles and carefully planned stunts. The film also launched Sandra Bullock into international stardom. Although Keanu Reeves was already gaining recognition, Speed established both actors as major Hollywood stars. Their natural chemistry became one of the movie's biggest strengths and helped make the story feel believable despite its unbelievable situations. Finally, the ending sends a simple but powerful message. Intelligence without compassion can become dangerous, while courage combined with teamwork can overcome even impossible situations. Howard Payne possesses extraordinary technical skills, but uses them to destroy lives. Jack and Annie, on the other hand, rely on trust, determination, and selflessness to save others. That contrast gives the movie emotional depth beyond its spectacular action scenes. Even after the explosions and the credits roll, Speed 1994 remains memorable because it tells a story about ordinary people showing extraordinary courage when facing impossible odds. As the story of Speed 1994 comes to an end, it becomes clear why the film is still regarded as one of the greatest action thrillers ever made. More than 30 years after its release, the movie continues to entertain new audiences because it combines suspense, fast-paced storytelling, memorable characters, and practical action sequences in a way that very few films have matched. Instead of relying on endless explosions alone, Speed keeps viewers emotionally invested by making every decision matter. Every action taken by Jack Traven has real consequences, and every mistake could cost innocent lives. This constant tension keeps the audience engaged from the opening scene until the final frame. One of the biggest reasons for the movie's success is its simple but brilliant concept. A bus cannot slow below 50 miles per hour, or a hidden bomb will explode. The idea is easy to understand, yet it creates endless possibilities for suspense. Every traffic light, every sharp turn, every traffic jam, and every unexpected obstacle instantly becomes life-threatening. The filmmakers take this single concept and continue building new challenges around it without making the story feel repetitive. As a result, the audience never knows what obstacle will appear next. Keanu Reeves delivers one of the strongest performances of his early career as Jack Traven. Instead of portraying an invincible superhero, he plays a determined police officer who makes mistakes, feels fear, and constantly adapts to changing situations. His calm personality and quick thinking make him believable as an action hero. Sandra Bullock is equally impressive as Annie Porter. She transforms from an ordinary passenger into someone who plays a vital role in saving dozens of lives. Her chemistry with Reeves feels natural, adding humor and warmth to an otherwise intense story. Dennis Hopper's performance as Howard Payne remains one of the highlights of the film. Payne is not driven purely by money. His real motivation comes from pride, anger, and a desire to prove that he is intellectually superior to everyone around him. This makes him a memorable villain because he believes he is always in control. Even when his plans begin falling apart, he refuses to admit defeat. His arrogance ultimately becomes the reason for his downfall. Director Jon de Bont deserves enormous credit for creating such a thrilling experience. His use of practical stunts, real vehicles, and large-scale explosions gives the movie an authenticity that many modern action films struggle to achieve. Instead of depending heavily on computer-generated effects, the filmmakers performed many dangerous sequences for real, making every chase and explosion feel more exciting. The famous bus jump, although exaggerated, remains one of the most iconic moments in action movie history. The film's pacing is another major strength. There are very few slow moments because every scene introduces either a new challenge or an important piece of information. The elevator rescue, the bus crisis, the airport sequence, the ransom exchange, and the subway finale all connect smoothly, creating one continuous adventure. Rather than feeling like separate action scenes, they become chapters of one larger story that constantly raises the stakes. The music also deserves recognition. Composer Mark Mancina created a fast, energetic score that perfectly matches the movie's non-stop intensity. The soundtrack increases suspense during quiet moments and makes every action sequence feel even more exciting. Combined with excellent sound design, it helps create the unforgettable atmosphere that fans still remember today. Upon its release in 1994, Speed became both a critical and commercial success. It earned worldwide praise for its direction, performances, action scenes, and original concept. The film was also a major box office hit, proving that audiences appreciated intelligent action movies built around suspense rather than excessive violence. It won 2 Academy Awards for Best Sound and Best Sound Effects Editing, recognizing the outstanding technical work that helped make the movie so realistic. Even today, many filmmakers consider Speed one of the greatest examples of how to build tension in an action film. Its influence can be seen in countless movies that followed, many of which borrowed the idea of placing ordinary people inside extraordinary situations with simple but terrifying rules. Few, however, have managed to recreate the same level of excitement and emotional investment. Overall, Speed, 1994, remains a timeless classic because it successfully combines thrilling action, memorable performances, intelligent storytelling, and genuine emotional stakes. Whether someone is watching it for the first time or returning after many years, the movie still delivers an exciting experience from beginning to end. For fans of action, suspense, and classic Hollywood filmmaking, Speed is absolutely worth watching. It is more than just an action movie. It is a perfect example of how great storytelling, strong characters, and non-stop tension can create a film that remains unforgettable for generations. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this movie explanation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting movie breakdowns.